Dear listeners, thank you for your incredible support in helping our channel grow. We're aiming for 1,000 subscribers, so please support us by subscribing and helping us reach this milestone. Now let's start the story. Jacob Calloway gripped the crystal tumbler in his hand, his gaze fixed on his wife, Renee, sprawled across their imported Italian leather couch. The diamond necklace he had given her for their 10th anniversary still rested against her neck, catching the morning light streaming through the windows. Her wine-stained lips were slightly parted as she snored, blissfully unaware that her drunken confession had just shattered 13 years of marriage. The construction mogul's mind raced, not with calculations of building materials or project timelines, but with thoughts of destruction. At 42, Jacob had built his empire from nothing, rising from job sites to boardrooms through sheer determination. Now, standing in his own living room at 7 a.m., he considered how to dismantle someone else's world. Brandon was always the one I really wanted. Renee's slurred words from hours earlier replayed in his mind. She had been on her 4th glass of wine, well past the point of maintaining her carefully curated facade. You were just safe. My backup plan. Her laughter had echoed through their custom-designed living room. 13 years, Jimmy. I never really loved you. Jacob raised the tumbler to his lips, letting the aged scotch scorch away the bitter taste of betrayal. His father's voice echoed in his thoughts. Control the battlefield before engaging the enemy. Mitchell Calloway, a former Navy SEAL, had drilled military discipline into his son from an early age. After Jacob's mother died, it had been just the two of them, and those lessons had served him well in business. Now, they would serve another purpose. The sharp click of heels on marble pulled him from his thoughts. Maria, their housekeeper, halted in the doorway, her eyes widening at the scene before her. Mr. Calloway, I'm sorry I didn't. Jacob held up a hand, his voice calm and controlled. It's fine, Maria. Mrs. Calloway had a late night. Make sure she has aspirin and water when she wakes up. I'll be in my study. In the mahogany-paneled sanctuary of his office, Jacob pulled up his computer and accessed his contacts. The first call went to his head of security, Frank Torres. Frank, I need a full surveillance package on Brandon Morton, everything. Financial records, medical licenses, current address, phone records. And Frank, this stays between us. Understood? Got it, boss. Clean and quiet. Next came the banking records. As CEO of Calloway Construction, Jacob had cultivated strong relationships with every major financial institution in Boston. Renee's trust fund, which he had carefully managed for years, would require special attention. A soft knock interrupted his planning. Emily, their 15-year-old daughter, stood in the doorway, already dressed in her Beacon Hill Academy uniform. Dad, is Mom okay? I heard her coming in really late last night. Jacob studied his daughter's face, Renee's delicate features, but his own sharp jawline and piercing intelligence. The sudden thought that she might not even be his child sent a wave of fury through him, but he forced himself to remain composed. Your mother's fine, sweetheart. Just a bit under the weather. Harvey will drive you to school today. Emily lingered, her sharp eyes flicking toward the untouched bed in the adjacent master bedroom. Her father's clothes from yesterday were still neatly pressed. Dad, what's really going on? Jacob crossed the room, placing his hands on her shoulders. Nothing you need to worry about right now. Focus on your studies. We'll talk more later. After Emily left, Jacob returned to his computer. A message from Frank was already waiting in his encrypted email. Morton took a position at Mass General 6 months ago, cardiothoracic surgery department. Notable gambling activity flagged at Mohegan Sun and several offshore sites. More details incoming. The pieces were falling into place. Renee's sudden interest in hospital volunteering, her increasingly late girls' nights, the secret glances at her phone. A text from his construction site manager pulled him from his thoughts. Crisis at Seaport Project. Need immediate decision. On my way, Jacob replied. Maintaining normalcy was crucial now. He had built his reputation on hands-on management, and today would be no different. Before leaving, he paused in the living room. Renee had shifted in her sleep, the diamond necklace now twisted awkwardly around her throat. He recalled the day he bought it, $50,000 at Tiffany's, a symbol of their successful marriage. Now, it represented something else entirely. Collateral. Jacob pulled out his phone and snapped several photos of his wife passed out on the couch, the scattered wine bottles surrounding her. His father would have called it documentation for the war ahead. At the front door, he turned to Maria. If she asks, tell her I had an early meeting. And Maria, no calls from the house line today. The phone system's being upgraded. The housekeeper nodded, understanding in her eyes. She had worked for Jacob for 10 years and had likely seen more than she let on. Behind the wheel of his Range Rover, Jacob allowed himself one brief moment of raw, unrestrained rage. His hands clenched the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white, a single harsh breath escaping through his clenched teeth. Then, as his father had taught him, he locked the emotion away and focused on the mission ahead. For the next several hours, the job site demanded his full attention, a dispute over structural steel specifications that required his expertise. He moved through meetings and inspections with the same mechanical efficiency that had built his empire. His mind worked in overdrive, simultaneously managing the job site while strategizing his next move. During a break, another email from Frank arrived. Morton's gambling debts exceed $2 million, connected to Danny Marquez's operation. Hospital Foundation finances show irregularities. Sending full report by secure courier. For the first time that day, Jacob smiled. A sharp, cold expression that made a nearby foreman instinctively step back. Brandon Morton had just handed him the perfect weapon for his first strike. His phone buzzed with a text from Renee. "Jimmy, I'm so sorry about last night. Can we talk when you get home?" He ignored it and instead called Detective Maya Reyes. They had grown up in the same blue-collar neighborhood, and like him, Maya had climbed her way to the top, now head of the Financial Crimes Division, fueled by the same relentless drive that had built his empire. "Maya, need to meet. Usual place. 1 hour." The diner hadn't changed since their childhood, the same cracked vinyl booths, the same coffee strong enough to strip paint. Maya slid into the booth across from him, her detective's eyes scanning his face. "You look like hell, Jacob. Renee's been having an affair." Her expression hardened. She had never liked Renee, always seeing past the polished socialite veneer to the emptiness beneath. "How long?" "At least 6 months. With Brandon Morton." "The surgeon?" "Jesus." Maya leaned back, processing the implications. "What are you planning?" Jacob stirred his coffee, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "I'm going to take everything from them. Not just money or reputation. Everything." Maya glanced around the empty diner. "You need to be careful. Your position. I built my company from nothing. I can survive anything. They can't." She studied him for a long moment, recognizing the cold, calculated determination in his eyes. "You'll need clean intel, nothing that ties back to you. That's why I'm here." She exhaled, nodding slowly. "I'll help. But, Jacob, remember Emily. Whatever you do, she needs her father." The mention of Emily ignited another surge of rage, but Jacob forced it into focus, refining his plan. "I know. She's all that matters now." Back at his office, Jacob began making calls. A city councilman who owed him for some discreet renovations. A bank executive whose daughter had gotten into Harvard thanks to Jacob's alumni connections. The head of the hospital board whose summer house had been built at a very generous discount. Each conversation was carefully crafted, planting seeds of doubt, influence, and leverage. By the time he hung up, the foundations of Brandon Morton's life had been mined with explosives. All that remained was to light the fuse. Renee called 3 more times. Jacob let each one go to voicemail, picturing her growing panic as she tried to recall exactly what she had revealed in her drunken state. The final email of the day came from his private investigator. Discrete DNA testing facilities, reliable, with same-day results. Jacob stared at the information for a long moment before saving it to an encrypted folder. By the time he drove home, the sun had set. His plans were laid out with the same meticulous precision he applied to his construction projects. Renee's BMW was gone from the driveway, likely seeking refuge with her society friends, already trying to spin the story in her favor. Inside, Emily sat at the kitchen island, textbooks spread in front of her. She looked up as he entered. "Dad, can we talk now?" Jacob saw the worry in her eyes, the same determination he felt in his own heart. Whatever the DNA results revealed, this was his daughter. She deserved the truth, most of it, anyway. "Let's order pizza," he said, shrugging off his jacket. "Your favorite place?" "Over pepperoni and mushroom pizza." Jacob listened as Emily described the changes she had noticed in her mother's behavior. The late nights, the secret phone calls, the new clothes, the sudden obsession with fitness. "I'm not stupid, Dad," she said finally. "I know something's really wrong." Jacob reached across the island and squeezed her hand. "No, you're not stupid. You're my daughter. And you deserve better than lies. Are you and Mom getting divorced?" The direct question, delivered with such adult composure, made Jacob's chest tighten. "Would that upset you?" Emily was quiet for a moment, picking at her pizza. I think it would upset me more if you stayed together just for me. I've seen how she treats you, Dad. Like you're not good enough for her fancy friends. But you're the one who actually built something." Pride and love warred with the anger in Jacob's heart. "Whatever happens, you're my priority. Remember that." Later, alone in his study, Jacob opened the secure files Frank had sent. Brandon Morton's life unfolded across the screen: medical school records, gambling debts, hospital finances, private appointments. The man who had helped destroy his marriage had left himself vulnerable on multiple fronts. A text from Maya lit up his phone. Financial Crimes is opening a quiet investigation into the hospital foundation's irregularities. Completely unrelated to you, of course. Jacob smiled and poured himself another scotch. The pieces were in motion. Soon, Brandon Morton would learn the cost of taking another man's life for granted. And Renee would discover that her safe choice had been anything but safe. In the morning, he would begin making arrangements for DNA testing. But tonight, he allowed himself to feel the full weight of betrayal, to let it forge his resolve into something harder, colder than mere revenge. On his desk, the diamond necklace gleamed, no longer a symbol of love, but of inevitable destruction. The week following Renee's confession unfolded with the precision of a military operation. Jacob moved through his daily routines like an actor performing a well-rehearsed play, all while his investigators worked behind the scenes to uncover the full extent of Brandon and Renee's betrayal. By Monday morning, he was seated in his corner office downtown, reviewing Frank Torres's latest report. Surveillance photos lay spread across his desk, each one tightening his jaw further. Renee and Brandon leaving a boutique hotel in Back Bay, sharing an intimate lunch at a secluded restaurant, disappearing into an apartment building that wasn't tied to either of their official addresses. Frank stood at parade rest before Jacob's desk, his expression unreadable. The apartment is registered to a shell company, he explained. Morton's been making payments through an offshore account. That same account shows regular transfers to some interesting characters in Vegas. Jacob studied a particular photo, Renee laughing at something Brandon had said, her hand resting intimately on his arm. The gambling connections? Danny Marquez runs a high-stakes operation. Morton's in deep, way beyond a surgeon's salary. He's been making payments, but he's falling behind. And the hospital foundation? Frank placed another folder on the desk. Morton sits on the board overseeing charitable donations. Large sums have been moving through accounts he has access to. Our forensic accountant found discrepancies dating back 6 months. Jacob nodded slowly, his mind calculating angles and leverage points. Keep digging. I want everything. After Frank left, Jacob picked up the phone and called his banking contact, Jonathan Pierce, at First Boston Trust. John, remember that favor you owe me? Time to collect. I need Renee's trust fund frozen immediately. Jacob, that's not exactly. Your daughter's Harvard acceptance. The rowing team scholarship. Would be a shame if someone looked too closely at those donations. A heavy silence filled the line. I'll need a reason, Jonathan finally said. Suspicious activity, possible criminal investigation, something official enough to satisfy her family's lawyers. Make it official. It'll be done by close of business. Jacob ended the call and turned to his computer, accessing the private investigator's portal. The DNA results had arrived that morning. Probability of paternity, 0%. The words should have shattered him. Instead, they crystallized his resolve. Emily might not share his blood, but she shared his spirit. That meant more than genetics. His intercom buzzed. Mr. Calloway, Mrs. Calloway is here to see you. Jacob straightened his tie and squared his shoulders. Send her in. Renee swept into the office like a force of nature, designer heels clicking against the hardwood, an Hermes scarf artfully draped around her neck, covering the faint bruising where the diamond necklace had pressed against her throat during her drunken sleep. Jimmy, we need to talk about what happened. He gestured to a chair without rising. I was drunk, she said quickly. I didn't mean to tell the truth. His voice remained calm, almost pleasant. 13 years, Renee. Why now? She shifted uncomfortably under his steady gaze. It was just, Brandon's back in town. Seeing him brought up old feelings. But it doesn't mean anything. You're my husband. You're. Safe choice, Jacob finished for her. Backup plan. Reaching into his desk drawer, he pulled out a manila envelope and placed it in front of her. Tell me about the apartment in Back Bay. The color drained from Renee's face. Unit 1, 25 the Grand View. Lovely views of the harbor, I'm told, Jacob said, his tone flat. Though I suppose you and Brandon weren't exactly focused on the scenery. Jacob, I can explain. He held up a hand, cutting her off. Can you explain this too? He slid the DNA results across the desk. Renee's hands trembled as she read the report. How does Brandon know? I never told him. Tears welled in her perfectly made-up eyes. Please, Jimmy, you can't. Can't what? His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Can't be angry that my wife has been lying to me for 15 years? Can't be furious that the daughter I raised isn't mine? Or can't do anything about it? What are you going to do? Jacob smiled. A slow, cold expression that never reached his eyes. Nothing. Yet. Go home, Renee. Enjoy your comfortable life while you can. After she fled his office, Jacob made another call, this time to Detective Reyes. The diner was nearly empty when he arrived, save for Mara, who was nursing a cup of coffee in their usual booth. As he sat down, she pushed a file across the table. Morton's been cooking the hospital's books. We've got enough for a warrant, but my captain wants a stronger case before moving. How long? A month. Maybe 2. Jacob stirred his coffee, watching the dark liquid swirl. Jacob, Mara leaned in, lowering her voice. Whatever you're planning, it could destroy everything you've built. They already destroyed everything, Mara. I'm just arranging the funeral. And Emily? She asked. What happens when she learns the truth? She's stronger than anyone knows, Jacob said, meeting Mara's concerned gaze. Like her father. Her eyes widened slightly. You confirmed it? This morning, he said. Brandon Morton has been her biological father all along. Jesus, Jacob. Mara ran a hand through her short, dark hair. That changes things. No, it doesn't. Emily is my daughter in every way that matters. But Brandon and Renee? They don't get to walk away from this. Back at his office, an urgent message from his hospital board contact awaited him. Morton had called an emergency meeting, scrambling to explain discrepancies in the foundation's accounts. The noose was tightening. Jacob maintained his routine with military precision as he orchestrated the opening moves of his response. Each morning, he left for work at exactly 7:30 a.m., kissing Emily goodbye as Harvey waited with the car. Each evening, he returned home to share dinner with his daughter, listening to her school stories while Renee made increasingly flimsy excuses for her absences. Mom said she's having dinner with Aunt Caroline again, Emily mentioned one evening, pushing her pasta around her plate. That's the 3rd time this week, Jacob said, setting down his fork. Aunt Caroline is in Paris until next month, Emily added. I know. Her voice carried a weight beyond her 15 years. Dad, I need to show you something. She pulled out her phone and opened a folder of photos. Jacob's grip tightened around his glass as he swiped through the images. Renee and Brandon, entering the Grandview apartment building, sharing intimate moments in public, acting like love-struck teenagers instead of middle-aged adulterers. How long have you been collecting these? 3 months. Emily's chin lifted defiantly. I'm not stupid, Dad. I saw how Mom changed when he came back to Boston. The new clothes, the gym membership, the sudden interest in volunteer work at the hospital. Jacob reached across the table, gripping his daughter's hand. You shouldn't have had to deal with this alone. She squeezed his hand back. I'm a Calloway. We handle our problems. In that moment, something crystallized in Jacob's mind. Emily was his daughter, biology be damned. She had his strength, his strategic mind, his unwavering loyalty. Brandon Morton may have contributed DNA, but Jacob had shaped her character. Later that night, in his study, Jacob received an encrypted email from Frank Torres. Boss, Morton's getting sloppy. Made contact with Danny Marquez's people at an underground casino. Caught it on video. Marquez isn't happy about the payment schedule. Jacob picked up his secure phone and dialed a rarely used number. Mr. Calloway, a smooth, professional voice answered. How can my security firm be of service? I need information on Danny Marquez's operation. Specifically, his relationship with Brandon Morton. That could be complicated. Money isn't an issue. A brief pause. I'll have something for you tomorrow. The next day, Renee came home early, her usual polished exterior beginning to crack. She paced the kitchen as Jacob calmly ate his lunch. The bank won't release my trust fund, she said, her voice trembling with barely controlled panic. Daddy's lawyers say there's some kind of investigation. How unfortunate. Jacob took another bite of his sandwich. Renee's eyes narrowed. Did you do this? I'm just a simple contractor, remember? You're a safe choice. I hardly understand complex financial matters. I need that money, Jacob. He met her gaze steadily. What for, Renee? Hospital volunteering doesn't pay that well. The color drained from her face. Unit 1, 25, must have a lovely view, though the lease seems rather expensive for a part-time surgeon's salary. Renee gripped the counter for support. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. Jacob stood, placing his plate in the dishwasher with deliberate care. You should ask Brandon about his gambling debts. Danny Marquez isn't known for his patience. How do you know about? She stopped herself, but the damage was done. I know everything, Renee. Every lie. Every secret meeting. Every dollar he's stolen from the hospital foundation to pay his debts. The only question is, what do you think I'm going to do with that information? She took a step back, seeing her husband clearly for the first time in 13 years. Not the safe choice, but a predator who had been patiently waiting to strike. Jimmy, please. You should go lie down, he said gently, which somehow made it worse. You look tired. All those late nights must be catching up with you. After she fled upstairs, Jacob checked his messages. The security firm had delivered its report on Danny Marquez, more than he had hoped for. Detailed records of Brandon's gambling debts. Proof of threatening messages. Surveillance photos from the casino. The next piece fell into place. That afternoon, As Jacob was leaving a construction site, Detective Reyes called. "We've got Morton's financial records. The hospital foundation money definitely passed through his personal accounts before landing in the offshore ones. My captain has given the green light to move forward with the investigation." "How long?" "We'll start interviewing hospital board members next week. Morton doesn't know yet, but he will soon." Jacob hung up and placed one more call to his contact at the Boston Globe. The reporter had been eager to repay a favor. Years ago, Jacob had ensured certain construction site accidents stayed out of the papers. Now, that debt would be settled, with a series of explosive articles exposing financial misconduct at one of Boston's most prestigious hospitals. The foundation was set. Brandon Morton's carefully constructed life was about to collapse under the weight of his own choices. Renee would be forced to watch as her lover unraveled, taking her reputation and financial security down with him. But first, Jacob had one more move to make. He found Emily in the library, studying for her biology exam. The irony didn't escape him. "How would you feel about spending more time with your grandfather?" Emily looked up, surprised. "Grandpa Mike. Is he coming to visit? I think it's time he moved back to Boston." Jacob sat beside her. "Things might get complicated here soon. Having him around would make me feel better." "Because of Mom and Brandon?" Jacob studied her expression, the determination in her eyes, the firm set of her jaw. So much like his own. "Yes. Your grandfather understands complicated situations. Military training. You think we'll need military training? I think we need family we can trust." Jacob pulled out his phone and showed her the DNA test results. "There's something you should know." Emily read the report slowly, her hands steady. When she looked up, her eyes were dry. "Does this change anything?" "Only if we let it." She nodded once, decisive. "Then we don't let it. You're my dad. Biology doesn't matter." A fierce pride surged through Jacob. Renee and Brandon could have their affair, their secret apartment, their stolen money, but they would never understand real loyalty. That night, as Jacob reviewed the final pieces of his plan, a text arrived from an unknown number. "Marquez wants to meet. Neutral ground. Tomorrow." It was an unexpected opportunity, but also a risk. Danny Marquez wasn't known for peaceful negotiations. Still, the potential for additional leverage was too tempting to ignore. Jacob sent a single-word reply. "Where?" The response came immediately. "Your choice." A smile flickered across Jacob's face in the darkness of his study. Even Boston's most notorious underground casino boss understood the power of home field advantage. The safe choice wasn't feeling so safe anymore. Jacob Calloway sat in his downtown office, gazing out the vast windows at the morning bustle of Boston's financial district. A month had passed since Renee's drunken confession, and now Jacob's carefully laid plans were set for execution. His computer chimed with an incoming email from his anonymous account. The message contained detailed financial records from Massachusetts General Hospital's charitable foundation, evidence of systematic theft spanning months. With 3 clicks, copies were sent to the hospital board, the Boston Globe, and the state attorney general's office. His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Sir, Detective Reyes is here." Mira strode in, her detective's badge glinting at her hip. "It started," she said. "The hospital board called an emergency meeting this morning. Brandon Morton's attendance was required. He's already there, trying to explain away $2 million in missing donations." She perched on the edge of his desk as Jacob pulled up a live surveillance feed of the hospital boardroom. Morton's usual confidence had crumbled under the weight of Boston's elite medical establishment's stern gazes. "Look at him squirm," Mira muttered. "He's realizing there's no way to hide the money trail." "The cancer research funds were particularly sloppy," Jacob said, his voice cold. "Danny Marquez must have been pressing hard for payments." Mira lowered her voice. "Speaking of Marquez, word is, he's not happy about Morton using stolen charity money to pay off gambling debts. Bad for business when the feds get involved." Jacob's phone buzzed with a text from Frank Torres. "Package delivered to Marquez. He's reviewing the evidence now." The package contained undeniable proof of Brandon's embezzlement, along with documentation of his attempts to play rival gambling syndicates against each other. Danny Marquez wouldn't take kindly to learning that his prized customer had been double-dealing. A call from Renee interrupted his thoughts. He let it go to voicemail, picturing her panic as she discovered her trust fund had been frozen. The timing was no coincidence. Jacob had ensured the bank's action aligned perfectly with the hospital board meeting. His next call came from Wilson Montague, Renee's father. "What the hell is going on, Jacob?" Montague's voice was sharp with anger. "The bank froze Renee's accounts, pending a criminal investigation." Jacob's tone was smooth, laced with false concern. "Hello, Wilson. I'm afraid I don't handle the family's banking matters anymore. Perhaps you should ask Renee about her recent financial activities or Brandon Morton's." A sharp intake of breath. "Morton? What does he have to do with this?" You might want to read tomorrow's Boston Globe, Jacob said coolly. I hear there's an interesting story breaking about hospital foundation funds and gambling debts. The line went dead. Jacob checked his watch, right on schedule. By now, Wilson would be calling his country club friends, scrambling to contain the impending scandal. His office door opened again, this time admitting Frank Torres. Boss, we've got movement at the hospital, Frank reported. Morton just left the board meeting. He's headed to the Back Bay apartment. Renee's already there. She got the trust fund notification an hour ago. Jacob straightened his tie. Time to make an appearance, I think. Call Harvey. Have him bring the car around. The drive to Back Bay took 15 minutes. Jacob used the time to coordinate with his team. Surveillance photos of Brandon and Renee entering their love nest would hit social media within the hour, perfectly timed to coincide with the first online headlines about the hospital investigation. Unit 1, 25 at the Grandview was registered to one of Brandon Shaw's companies, an easy trail for investigators to follow. Another team had been documenting every one of Brandon and Renee's meetings there, carefully building a timeline of their affair that would make denial impossible. You sure about this, boss? Harvey asked as they pulled up to the building. Could get messy. Jacob stepped out of the car, smoothing his jacket. Mess is exactly what we want, Harvey. Some things need to be seen to be believed. The building's security recognized him immediately. His construction company had renovated the lobby last year. No one questioned his presence as he took the elevator to the 12th floor. Even before reaching 1205, he could hear the argument inside. Brandon's voice was tight with panic. What do you mean it's frozen? All of it, Renee's voice cracked. The accounts, the cards, even my personal savings. Daddy's lawyers say there's some kind of investigation. This can't be happening. Not now. Marquez is expecting another payment this week. Jacob pressed a small recording device against the door, capturing every word. More evidence for the right moment. Who's Marquez? Renee's voice rose. Brandon hesitated. It's nothing. I had some gambling debts, but I was handling it. With what money? A long pause. Then, finally, the hospital foundation had cash flow flexibility. I was going to pay it back. Renee's voice turned sharp, almost hysterical. The foundation? The Children's Cancer Research money? Are you insane? Jacob's phone vibrated. The first Boston Globe article had just gone live. Right on cue, Brandon's phone began ringing inside the apartment. Morton, Brandon answered. What? No, that's impossible. The board meeting was confidential. The Globe? What article? Jacob stepped back from the door, satisfied. His work here was done. The recording would be invaluable leverage later. But for now, the priority was ensuring his own alibi. He had a lunch meeting scheduled with the mayor, a public appearance that would distance him from the day's events. His phone buzzed again. Alara Montague. Renee's mother was calling. He answered as he stepped into the elevator. Jacob, darling, Alara's socialite polish couldn't quite mask the desperation in her voice. There must be some misunderstanding about Renee's accounts. I'm afraid not, Alara. The bank's compliance department flagged some concerning transactions. They tend to be quite thorough when it comes to potential criminal activity. Criminal? A sharp intake of breath. But surely, I understand Brandon Morton's name came up in their investigation. Jacob continued smoothly. Something about misappropriated hospital funds. Alara's gasp told him she had just seen the news. Oh God, the foundation money. Renee wasn't involved in that, was she? I couldn't say, Jacob replied, his tone carefully neutral. I'm just a simple contractor, after all. These complex financial matters are beyond me. The elevator door slid open, and Jacob stepped into the lobby. I should go. I'm having lunch with Mayor Collins. Give my best to Wilson. The mention of the mayor was intentional. The Montags would understand the message. Jacob had powerful friends too, and they had chosen the wrong man to underestimate. Harvey was already waiting by the car, holding the door open. Where to, boss? Leon. I believe we're about to have a very productive lunch with His Honor. As they drove, Jacob checked his messages. The surveillance photos had gone viral, spreading through Boston's elite circles like wildfire. Brandon and Renee's affair was now public knowledge. Any attempts at discretion utterly destroyed. Another message from Frank. Marquez's people spotted at the hospital. They're asking questions about Morton's access to foundation accounts. Perfect. The criminal element would add pressure from a direction Brandon couldn't handle. A surgeon with wealthy connections was one thing. A desperate man drowning in mob debts was another entirely. Jacob's phone rang again. Mirror, the board just filed a formal complaint. My team's moving in to secure the foundation's records. And Morton's reaction? He tried deleting files as soon as the Globe article hit. Our tech team is recovering everything now. He's not very good at covering his tracks. No, Jacob agreed, watching Boston's exclusive restaurants pass by. He never was. Another text came through, this one from Emily. Dad, have you seen the news? Mom's not answering her phone. Having lunch with the mayor, he replied. We'll talk tonight. Don't worry about your mother. Emily's response was pure Calloway strength. I'm not worried about her. I'm worried about what she'll try to do next. Jacob smiled. His daughter understood the game better than Renee ever had. The safe choice had turned out to be anything but safe for those who had betrayed him. At Leon, Matra greeted him with perfect deference, leading him to a private room where Mayor Collins was already waiting. As Jacob took his seat, his phone buzzed with another update. Brandon Morton had been suspended from the hospital pending investigation. The storm was gaining strength. Soon, Brandon and Renee would learn the true cost of underestimating Jacob Calloway. Renee's hands trembled as she paced the marble foyer of her parents' Beacon Hill mansion. The Boston Globe article exposing Brandon's embezzlement had sent shockwaves through their social circles, quickly followed by viral photos of their secret meetings. Their carefully maintained illusion of mere friendship had been obliterated. How could you be so stupid? Alara Montague's voice was sharp as cut crystal. Stealing from a children's cancer charity. What were you thinking? I didn't steal anything. Renee protested. That was all Brandon. I didn't know. But you knew he was gambling. Wilson Montague interrupted, his normally ruddy face unnervingly pale. You knew he was in trouble, and you said nothing. I thought I could help him. Renee sank onto a Louis XIV chair, her mind reeling. The trust fund, which is now frozen pending criminal investigation, Wilson snapped. His hands clenched into fists. Do you have any idea what this will do to our family's reputation? Alara paced the room, her Hermes scarf fluttering with every sharp movement. We have to get ahead of this. Release a statement distancing ourselves from Morton. Make it clear you were manipulated. What about Jacob? Renee's voice cracked. He has to be behind this. The timing. Jacob? Wilson let out a harsh, bitter laugh. The simple contractor you never thought was good enough? He's having lunch with the mayor right now while your lover is being investigated for stealing from sick children. Renee's phone buzzed, another call from Brandon. She had stopped answering after their fight at the apartment. His messages had grown increasingly desperate as the day wore on. What are we going to do? She whispered. Alara's expression hardened. We're going to salvage what we can of the Montague name. You're going to file for divorce before Jacob does. And claim what? Wilson interjected. That her affair with a gambling addict who stole from charity was Jacob's fault? Exactly. Alara's eyes gleamed. We'll say Jacob was controlling, abusive, that he drove her to seek comfort elsewhere. It's our only move. Renee's phone buzzed again. This time, a text from Emily. I know everything. Don't try to contact me. Tears welled in Renee's eyes. Emily. She's another problem, Alara said briskly, already typing on her phone. We'll file for emergency custody. Claim Jacob is unstable, dangerous. He'll fight it, Wilson warned. Of course he will. Alara's smile was razor-sharp. But the courts favor mothers. And we still have some influence, the right judges, the right experts. Wilson hesitated before clearing his throat. That influence may be limited now. The Hospital Foundation scandal. Our name is toxic. Then we use that. Alara turned on her husband, eyes blazing. Paint Jacob as the mastermind. Say he set Brandon up, manipulated everything to destroy Renee's reputation. Renee's hands shook as she pulled up her banking apps. Every account showed the same message. Access restricted pending investigation. Her American Express card had been declined at Neiman Marcus that morning, her first warning sign. Then came the trust fund notification. Then the Globe article. Now, her entire world was imploding. Brandon had sworn he could fix everything. He just needed time, money, and for someone named Marquez to be patient. Renee had believed him, just as she had once believed his promises about leaving his wife back in college. Her phone buzzed with a news alert. Massachusetts General Hospital suspends prominent surgeon amid financial investigation. The article detailed Brandon's gambling debts, his ties to organized crime, and his misuse of charitable funds. It also prominently mentioned his recent personal relationship with Renee Montague Calloway, daughter of a prominent Boston family. They can't print that, she gasped. It's already trending, Alara snapped, snatching the phone from her hands. Twitter, Facebook, those photos of you two are everywhere. What photos? Alara thrust the phone back at her. Renee's hands trembled as she scrolled through image after image, her and Brandon entering the Grandview, sharing intimate moments at restaurants, looking every bit the adulterers they were. Jacob, she whispered. He must have had us followed. Of course he did. Wilson roared. Did you really think he was that oblivious? That man built a construction empire from nothing. He doesn't miss details. Renee's mind raced through recent memories. Jacob's late nights at the office, his cryptic phone calls, the way he had seemed almost amused by her excuses for visiting the hospital. He's been planning this, she realized. All of it. And you handed him everything he needed. Alara's voice dripped with contempt. The affair. The trust fund access. Even Emily's paternity. Renee's head snapped up. How did you? It's in the divorce petition. Wilson waved a thick envelope. His lawyers just filed. Along with evidence of your affair, Brandon's criminal activities, and your involvement in his financial schemes. I wasn't involved. You gave him access to your trust fund. Wilson's face darkened. Money he used to pay gambling debts while stealing from charity. The optics alone. Renee's phone buzzed again. Brandon's message made her blood run cold. Marquez's men are looking for me. I need money. Now. Who's Marquez? Alara demanded, reading over her shoulder. Brandon's bookie, apparently, Renee murmured, her own voice sounding distant. He said he owed some people money. Wilson snatched the phone from her hand. A bookie? You got involved with a surgeon who owes money to bookies? He said he could handle it. Renee's composure cracked. He just needed help covering a few payments until the hospital situation improved. The hospital situation? Alara's eyes narrowed. You knew about the foundation money. Not everything. Renee hugged herself. He said there were cash flow issues, investment opportunities. I didn't know he was actually stealing. Wilson's face had gone from pale to gray. How much of your trust fund went to pay his gambling debts? I don't. Maybe $500,000, Renee whispered. He promised to pay it back. The sharp crash of shattering crystal made her flinch. Alara had thrown a baccarat vase against the wall. $500,000? Her mother shrieked. To pay a bookie? Marquez isn't just a bookie. Wilson was staring at his phone, his expression grim. He runs one of the biggest illegal gambling operations in New England. He's connected to organized crime. Renee's phone lit up with another message from Brandon. They're saying you knew about the foundation money. Did you tell someone? I didn't know. She typed back frantically. I swear. Then why is Jacob Calloway having lunch with the mayor while my life falls apart? Renee stared at the message, her mind flashing back to Jacob's expression the morning after her drunken confession. She had mistaken his calm for shock, his silence for weakness. Now she understood. She had simply given him the excuse he needed to strike. We need a lawyer, Alara announced. Someone who can spin this properly. Paint you as the victim of both Brandon's manipulation and Jacob's revenge. Jacob has evidence, Wilson reminded her. Real evidence. Not just spin. Then we'll fight fire with fire. Alara's jaw tightened. Renee, call Dr. Walsh. We need Emily's therapist to document Jacob's controlling behavior. Renee let out a brittle, almost hysterical laugh. Dr. Walsh won't help. She knows. Alara's eyes narrowed. Knows what? Everything. Renee swallowed hard. Emily's been telling her about the affair for months. Showing her evidence, she collected herself. Wilson sank into a chair, his face ashen. Your daughter was gathering evidence against you? She's just like him. Renee's voice broke. Everyone thinks Jacob is the safe, steady one, but he's not. He's the most dangerous man I've ever met. Her phone chimed again. Marquez knows about us. Says you're as responsible as I am. God help us both. Renee looked up at her parents, seeing their carefully curated world crumbling around them. What have I done? She whispered. You've destroyed everything, Alara said flatly. Now we have to see what we can salvage from the wreckage. Beyond the mansion's windows, reporters had begun to gather. The Montague name, once a shield against scandal, now a beacon drawing it in. Renee's phone buzzed one last time. You wanted Brandon. You got him. Enjoy the consequences. Jacob. She stared at the message, the full magnitude of her mistake crashing over her. Jacob hadn't been safe at all. He had been a predator, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Brandon Morton paced the confines of his Back Bay apartment, panic rising in his throat as he watched his life unravel in real time through the relentless scroll of news updates. The hospital board suspension had been just the beginning. Now, federal investigators were combing through his financial records, and Danny Marquez's men were asking questions he couldn't answer. His phone rang. Marquez's personal number. Brandon's hands shook as he answered. Danny, I can explain. Save it. Marquez's voice was pure ice. You've been playing both sides. Using charity money to cover your gambling debts while negotiating with my competition? That's not how this works. Danny, please. Someone sent proof. Marquez's tone didn't change. Screenshots of your conversations with Joey Ventura's crew. Think they'll be more understanding than me? Brandon sank onto his leather couch, bought with stolen foundation funds, his mind racing for a way out. I can fix this, he said weakly. Marquez's silence was deafening. Then, finally, Renee's trust fund is frozen pending criminal investigation. Marquez's laugh held no humor. You really think Jacob Calloway didn't plan for that? The mention of Jacob's name sent a chill down Brandon's spine. What do you know about Calloway? I know he's having lunch with the mayor while my boys watch you sweat. I know he's got enough evidence to bury you 10 times over. And I know you're out of time. Please, I just need. You need a miracle, Marquez interrupted. And I ain't in that business. The line went dead. Brandon's phone immediately lit up with another call. Renee, they're freezing my accounts, she said, her voice raw with panic. The foundation money, the gambling, it's all over the news. Your husband's behind this. Brandon ran a hand through his disheveled hair. He must have been gathering evidence for weeks. Months, Renee corrected. Emily, she knew. She was helping him collect proof. Brandon's gut twisted. The daughter he'd never acknowledged had turned spy against her own mother. Does she know about the DNA? He asked. Yes, Renee whispered. Jacob made sure of that too. A sharp knock at the door made Brandon jump. Through the peephole, he saw two of Marquez's enforcers in expensive suits. I have to go, he muttered into the phone. Don't call for a while. The enforcers stepped inside, their faces calm, their stance delivering a message even without visible weapons. Mr. Marquez is concerned about the attention you're bringing to his business interests, the taller one said. The police investigation, Brandon stammered. The hospital board will be the least of your problems if you don't make this right. The shorter enforcer offered a thin, humorless smile. You have 24 hours to deliver the outstanding balance. $2 million. That's impossible. My accounts are frozen. Not our problem. The taller man glanced at his watch. Clock's ticking. As soon as they left, Brandon grabbed his phone and called the one person who might still help. David Chin. It's worse than we thought, Chin said without preamble. Calloway's team didn't just document the affair. They got proof you falsified medical records to cover your gambling losses. Brandon's throat went dry. What proof? Dates of procedures that never happened. Insurance claims for phantom surgeries. The foundation money was just the start. Brandon's career, his medical license, his reputation, everything he had built, gone because he had underestimated Jacob Calloway's capacity for revenge. Can you fight it? Brandon asked, grasping at straws. Fight what? Chin's bitter laugh echoed through the line. The federal investigation? The hospital board? Marquez's organization? Your lover's husband, who apparently has half of Boston's power players in his pocket. There has to be something. There's nothing left to fight with, Chin said flatly. Your reputation is destroyed, your assets are frozen, and you've got organized crime breathing down your neck. My advice? Run. Run far and fast. The call ended. Brandon stared at his reflection in the apartment's window. The distinguished surgeon was gone. In his place stood a haunted man, facing total destruction. His phone buzzed. A text from Renee. My parents are filing emergency custody papers, claiming Jacob is unstable. Dangerous. Brandon let out a harsh, bitter laugh. Jacob Calloway, the calculating destroyer of lives, would eat them alive in court. Another knock at the door. This time, it was Detective Mira Reyes, flanked by two uniformed officers. Dr. Morton. Her badge glinted as she held up a warrant. Financial Crimes Division. We need to discuss some irregularities in the hospital foundation's accounts. Brandon straightened. I want my lawyer present. Already called him. Myra's smile was predatory. He's meeting us at the station, along with representatives from the FBI's white-collar crime unit. As the officers let him out, Brandon's phone lit up with one final message. Jacob Calloway. You took my wife and daughter. I took your entire life. Fair trade. Sitting in the police car, it finally hit him. He hadn't just had an affair with a wealthy man's wife. He had challenged a force of nature. A man who had built an empire from nothing and would burn the world to protect what was his. The safe choice had proven to be anything but safe. And Brandon Morton's desperate hour was only beginning. His final downfall had started with a single email. At 9 a.m. on a Tuesday, a message landed in the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, containing detailed records of offshore accounts, filled with embezzled hospital foundation money. By noon, federal agents had seized his office at Massachusetts General Hospital. By dinner, his face dominated local news broadcasts as reporters detailed his theft from children's cancer research funds. Dr. Morton. An FBI agent stood in his office doorway, a warrant in hand. We need you to step away from the computer. Brandon's fingers froze over the keyboard, where he had been frantically attempting to delete incriminating files. I can explain. Save it for your lawyer. The agent nodded to her team. Secure everything. Every drive, every document. Brandon's phone buzzed. Danny Marquez's number. He let it go to voicemail, knowing what awaited him. That morning, an unmarked envelope had landed in Marquez's hands, proof of Brandon's secret negotiations with rival gambling operations. His attempt to play different criminal organizations against each other had backfired spectacularly. Your personal devices too, Dr. Morton. Another agent held out an evidence bag. Phone, tablet, laptop. His surgeon's hands trembled as he handed them over. Through his office windows, he saw reporters gathering in the hospital parking lot. His colleagues averted their eyes as federal agents boxed up years of medical records. His office phone rang. The hospital board chairman. Richard Holbrook's voice dripped with contempt. The board has voted. Your privileges are permanently revoked, effective immediately. Richard, please. $2 million, Brandon. From pediatric cancer research. Do you have any idea how many children those funds could have helped? The line went dead. 2 more FBI agents entered, carrying boxes of financial records from the foundation office. Dr. Morton, a junior agent, said, stepping forward. We found some irregularities in your surgical records. Several procedures billed to insurance don't match hospital schedules. Brandon sank into his chair. The fraudulent surgeries. A desperate attempt to generate cash from Marquez's payments. Each false insurance claim. Another nail in his coffin. Brandon's cell phone lit up with a text from Renee. The Globe is calling my parents. What did you do with the foundation money? Before he could respond, another message arrived, this time from Marquez. You played both sides. Document. Big mistake. Check your email. Brandon's stomach dropped as he opened the email. Attached were photos of him meeting with representatives from Joey Ventura's rival gambling operation. The timestamps proved Marquez's people had been watching him for weeks. A commotion in the hallway pulled his attention away. Local news crews had breached hospital security, cameras rolling as they approached his office. Dr. Morton, can you comment on the allegations of embezzlement? What happened to the cancer research funds? Is it true you used charity money to pay gambling debts? FBI agents stepped in, forming a barrier, but the damage was done. His face would lead the evening news, his crimes laid bare for the world to see. Another text from Renee. My father's lawyer says they're freezing all my accounts. Says you implicated me in the foundation theft. Tell me that's not true. Brandon's hands shook as he typed. I needed your trust fund access. Marquez was threatening me. Her response came fast, cold. You used me. The affair, the promises, it was all about money. I loved you. But the debts? Go to hell. The FBI agent in charge approached his desk. Dr. Morton, we'll need you to come with us. The U.S. attorney has some questions about these offshore transactions. Brandon stood on unsteady legs, his career, reputation, and freedom crumbling around him. Through the office window, he spotted Jacob Calloway walking to his car, briefcase in hand. Their eyes met. Calloway's gaze was cold, triumphant. Brandon's was filled with dawning horror. The safe husband had orchestrated this entire downfall. Every leak, every damning piece of evidence, timed for maximum impact. We should go, Dr. Morton, the agent said, gripping his elbow. Unless you'd prefer to be arrested in front of the cameras. Brandon took one last look at his office. 15 years of medical practice reduced to evidence boxes and crime scene tape. His phone buzzed again. A final message from Marquez. Running won't help. Document. But feel free to try. The next hours passed in a blur of interrogation rooms and mounting charges. The U.S. attorney's evidence was overwhelming. Embezzlement, fraudulent insurance claims, falsified medical records, money laundering through offshore accounts. His lawyer arrived, his expression grim. They have everything, Brandon. Bank records, hospital documents, even recordings of your conversations with Marquez's people. How? Brandon croaked. The lawyer shuffled through his papers. Someone's been building this case for months. Recording everything. Documenting every transaction. Someone very thorough, very patient, and very motivated to destroy you. Brandon thought of Jacob Calloway's cold stare in the hospital parking lot. Can you get me a deal? He asked. With which agency? His lawyer shot back. The feds? The state? The medical board? Or the criminals you tried to double-cross? The door opened. Detective Mira Reyes from Financial Crime strode in and spread a series of photos across the table. Images of Brandon with Marquez's men. Want to explain these payments? She asked coolly. $2 million in embezzled charity funds, funneled through your lover's trust fund accounts. Brandon swallowed hard. I want immunity. For what? Mira leaned in, her smile devoid of warmth. Federal charges? State charges? Or from Danny Marquez's organization? On the table, Brandon's phone kept lighting up with messages from Renee. The hospital board. The reporters seeking comment. Each one another nail in his professional coffin. I need protection, Brandon whispered. Mira scoffed. Marquez's people are the least of your problems. She pushed a document across the table. The medical board is suspending your license pending investigation. The hospital's insurance company is filing fraud charges. And the IRS has some questions about those offshore accounts. Brandon stared down at his hands, once steady enough for delicate cardiac surgery, now trembling like a junkie's. Jacob Calloway did this. Did he force you to steal from sick children? Mira continued. Make you falsify medical records? Compel you to sleep with his wife while using her money to pay your gambling debts? Each question landed like a physical blow. Brandon saw his future disintegrating. No license, no practice, no reputation. Just federal charges and Marquez's enforcers waiting to collect their due. His lawyer touched his arm. Brandon, they're offering a deal. Full cooperation against Marquez's organization in exchange for consideration on the federal charges. Brandon swallowed hard. Marquez will kill me. You should have thought of that before stealing from children with cancer. Mira stood. You have an hour to decide. After that, we go public with everything. Brandon's phone lit up with a final message from Jacob Calloway. Consequences, Dr. Morton. Time to pay them. In that moment, the mask of Brandon Morton, respected surgeon, trusted physician, pillar of Boston society, finally shattered. The desperate coward beneath was laid bare. He ran. Using his last clean credit card, he booked a flight to Miami. He never made it to the airport. Marquez's men were waiting at his apartment. Their message was delivered with professional brutality. When Brandon regained consciousness in the emergency room of his own hospital, federal agents were stationed outside his door. His medical license was permanently revoked. His attempt to flee had only hastened his downfall. The next morning, the Boston Globe ran his story on the front page. Prominent surgeon charged in multi-million-dollar charity fraud. Below the headline, a photo showed him being led out of the hospital in handcuffs. His distinguished career had ended in disgrace. Jacob Calloway read the article over breakfast, satisfaction glinting in his eyes. The man who had tried to steal his family had lost everything: career, freedom, reputation. The price of betrayal, paid in full. Renee Montague Calloway stared at the eviction notice taped to her apartment door. Reality pierced the privileged bubble that had shielded her all her life. The trust fund that had cushioned her existence was gone, drained through a series of high-risk investments that had somehow aligned perfectly with Brandon's legal troubles. Inside, her few remaining possessions sat in moving boxes, designer clothes, luxury items she could no longer afford to keep. The diamond necklace Jacob had given her had vanished, along with her credit cards and the last of her cash. Her phone rang. Alara Montague, calling for the third time that day. Mother, please. Don't mother me. Alara's voice crackled with fury. Do you have any idea what you've done to this family? Your father can barely show his face at the club. I didn't know about Brandon's gambling. You knew enough. Alara snapped. Running around with a married man, giving him access to your trust fund, dragging our name into his criminal schemes. Renee sank onto a packing box. I thought he loved me. Alara barked out a bitter laugh. He loved your money, your social connections, your ability to help him avoid Marquez's enforcers. And now, he's disappeared, leaving you to face the consequences alone. Jacob did this, Renee whispered. He planned it all. Jacob? Alara's voice dripped with contempt. The safe choice you never thought was good enough? While you were playing adulteress with a gambling addict, your husband was building an empire. Now he's taking over the hospital foundation, turning it into a real charitable operation. He's being hailed as a savior, while we're nothing but social pariahs. Renee's phone beeped with an incoming message, Emily's first in months. Her heart leapt until she read the contents. A formal letter, cold and precise, detailing years of betrayal and manipulation. Your affair wasn't a surprise, Emily wrote. I watched you lie to Dad for months. Watched you sneak around with Brandon. Using the trust fund, he managed to finance your lover's gambling addiction. You threw away our family for a man who stole from sick children. Renee's hands trembled as she typed a response. Emily, please. I'm still your mother. The reply was instant. No. A mother protects her family. You destroyed ours. Dad raised me, loved me, taught me strength and loyalty. Biology doesn't make a parent, character does. Alara's voice cut through her grief. Emily refuses to see us too. Another bridge you've burned. I need help, mother. Just some money for an apartment. Just until... Until what? Alara snapped. Until Brandon returns with his stolen millions? Until Jacob forgives you? Until your reputation magically restores itself? I have nowhere to go. You have exactly what you chose. Alara's voice turned cold. Your father and I are moving to Palm Beach. The scandal, we can't stay in Boston. Don't contact us until this blows over. The line went dead. Renee stared at her phone, watching as each social media notification brought fresh humiliation. Friends unfriending her, club memberships revoked, party invitations rescinded. A knock at the door made her jump. The building manager stood there, his expression stern. Mrs. Calloway, your credit card was declined. Without payment, you'll need to vacate by Friday. I can get the money. From where? He handed her another notice. Your husband's lawyers have been clear. The apartment lease is terminated now that he's gone. Panic rising, Renee opened her banking apps. Each account displayed the same message. Access restricted pending investigation. Her American Express black card, the ultimate Montague family status symbol, had been canceled. She tried calling Brandon again. Disconnected. His hospital office phone, voicemail. His email, bounced back undelivered. Desperate, she dialed Jacob's office. Calloway Construction, a voice answered. I need to speak with Jacob. I'm sorry, Mrs. Calloway. Mr. Calloway has instructed us not to put your calls through. Please, it's an emergency. Your emergencies are no longer Mr. Calloway's concern. Good day. The line went dead. Renee sank onto the floor, surrounded by the wreckage of her life. The designer clothes hanging in her closet seemed to mock her now, tangible proof of the privileged existence she had once taken for granted. Her phone lit up with a news alert. Disgraced surgeon's lover linked to charity fraud. The article exposed her connection to Brandon's schemes, portraying her as either a willing accomplice or a fool who had enabled his crimes. Another message arrived. From Jacob. You made your choice 13 years ago. Live with it. The words struck deeper than any physical blow. She had chosen Brandon, the exciting, charming surgeon, who had turned out to be a fraud. She had rejected Jacob, the safe choice, who had proven to be a ruthless force of nature. Now, she truly understood what real power looked like. Not Brandon's superficial charm, not her family's crumbling social status, but Jacob's quiet, relentless strength. He hadn't just ended her affair. He had dismantled her entire world. 1 year after Renee's drunken confession, Jacob Calloway stood in his newly renovated kitchen, watching Emily chop vegetables for dinner. The room buzzed with warmth and life, so different from the cold, curated perfection Renee had once insisted upon. Dad. Emily's voice held a touch of concern. You're thinking about Mom again. Jacob smiled at his daughter. In all the ways that mattered. Just appreciating what we have now. The doorbell rang, announcing Mara Reyes's arrival for their weekly dinner. She had become a regular presence in their lives, her straight-talking nature a refreshing change from Boston society's polished deceptions. Something smells amazing, Mara called out, hanging up her detective's badge. Please tell me it's your lasagna. Emily's recipe, actually, Jacob replied. She's becoming quite the chef. The kitchen filled with easy conversation as they prepared the meal together. Jacob's company had flourished, expanding to absorb the hospital's charitable foundation and transforming it into a model of transparency and effective giving. The new pediatric wing opens next month, he mentioned, passing Mara a glass of wine. Full funding for childhood cancer research. Quite a change from Morton's days, Mara noted. Speaking of which, he's taking a plea deal. Full cooperation against Marquez's organization in exchange for a reduced sentence. Jacob nodded, satisfaction glinting in his eyes. And Renee? Mara asked. She left Boston last week. Her parents cut her off completely. He took a sip of his drink. Seems the Montague fortune took some hits in recent market movements. Emily's knife paused over the cutting board. Did you orchestrate their financial troubles too, Dad? Jacob's expression remained unreadable. The market can be unpredictable, he said smoothly, especially when certain investment advisors receive anonymous tips about risk factors. The doorbell rang again, this time announcing Mitchell Calloway. Jacob's father, the former Navy SEAL, had moved back to Boston, his military discipline and quiet strength adding another layer of support to their rebuilt family. Grandpa. Emily rushed forward, wrapping her arms around him. Did you bring the photos? Mitchell pulled out an old album, its worn cover holding decades of memories. Inside were pictures of Jacob as a child, learning construction at his father's side. Thought it was time for a family history lesson, he said. They gathered around the kitchen island, flipping through photographs that traced the Calloway family's journey, from hard-working builders to some of Boston's most influential power players. Your father was always different, Mitchell told Emily. They called it quiet strength, but I knew better. It was the kind of strength that either builds empires or burns them down. Is that why Mom's family thought he was safe? Emily asked. Because he seemed quiet? Mitchell's military-hardened demeanor softened as he smiled at his granddaughter. They mistook patience for weakness, he said. A mistake your mother and Brandon Morton won't make again. Mara lifted her glass. To patience, then, and consequences. To family, Emily added. The real kind. Jacob watched his daughter, seeing his own strength reflected in her. The DNA test proving Brandon's biological connection meant nothing against the bonds forged through loyalty and love. The diamond necklace that had set everything in motion now sat locked away in a safe deposit box, along with other evidence of Brandon and Renee's crimes. Insurance against any future threats to the life he had rebuilt from the ashes of betrayal. His phone buzzed with a news alert. The hospital foundation's stock had risen again. Under his leadership, stability and growth had returned. Where Brandon's theft had once caused chaos, Jacob had restored order. Another piece of vindication. Another quiet victory. Laughter filled the kitchen as Emily shared a story from school, her voice steady, confident, the same quiet determination that had carried Jacob from job sites to boardrooms. She was his legacy, not by blood, but by choice, by spirit. You did good, son, Mitchell murmured, watching Emily with pride. Show them what Calloway's strength really means. Jacob nodded, satisfaction settling deep within him. They had called him the safe choice, the steady husband, the reliable backup plan. They had never understood. Still waters run deep. and quiet strength, when provoked, can become devastating power. The price of betrayal had been paid in full. Brandon Morton would spend years in prison, his medical career in ruins, his reputation irreparably destroyed. Renee had lost everything: her wealth, her status, her family, even her daughter's love. The Montague name now carried the stain of scandal, their once lofty social standing crumbling like the fragile facade it had always been. And Jacob Calloway, the safe choice, had emerged stronger than ever. His company thrived, his influence grew, and his true family, built on loyalty rather than blood or social expectation, flourished in the aftermath of destruction. The diamond necklace would remain locked away, a reminder that some debts can only be settled in full. And the price of betrayal? Extracted with the same quiet strength that had built his empire. 10 years later, the Boston Globe's business section headline read, "Calloway Group acquires 10th Hospital, revolutionizing healthcare charity model." Jacob Calloway set the newspaper aside, a satisfied gleam in his eyes as he gazed out from his expanded office, the city skyline stretching before him. At 52, streaks of distinguished gray ran through his hair, but his presence remained as formidable as ever. His empire had grown far beyond construction. After transforming the Massachusetts General Hospital Foundation into a model of efficiency and transparency, he had systematically acquired struggling charitable hospitals across New England. Each acquisition followed the same pattern: identify mismanagement, step in as the savior, and rebuild with ruthless effectiveness. "Mr. Calloway," his assistant's voice came through the intercom, "your daughter is here." Emily Calloway strode in, every inch her father's daughter. At 25, she had already made a name for herself in Boston's corporate world. Her Harvard law degree and MBA hung on Jacob's office wall, though she had refused to trade on the Calloway name, proving herself in the city's top firms before joining her father's company as chief legal officer. "The Milton Hospital acquisition is ready," she announced, placing a thick folder on his desk. "Their board didn't stand a chance against our proposal." Jacob smiled with pride. Emily had inherited his strategic mind and unwavering determination, becoming a formidable negotiator. The truth about her biological father had only strengthened their bond, proving that character meant more than DNA. "Any complications?" he asked. "Nothing we couldn't handle," Emily replied, her smile mirroring his. "Though you might find one detail interesting, Brandon Morton applied for a position there last month." Jacob raised an eyebrow. "Did he now?" "Under a different name." She pulled out a document. 8 years in federal prison must have taught him some creativity. Since his release, he's been working as a medical consultant, trying to rebuild his career. And now? Now he's blacklisted from every hospital in New England. Emily's voice was cold, merciless. "I made sure his complete history reached their HR department. No one will risk hiring a convicted embezzler who stole from children's cancer research." Jacob nodded approvingly. They had watched Brandon's downfall from a distance. His plea deal, his prison sentence, his desperate attempts to salvage his former life. The man who had once tried to destroy their family now lived in a small Providence apartment, scraping by on consulting fees and freelance medical writing. "Any word from your mother?" Emily's expression hardened. "She tried reaching out last month." Another plea for reconciliation. She shook her head. "I had her messages blocked." Renee's fall had been just as complete. After leaving Boston, she drifted between smaller cities, attempting to rebuild her life. But Jacob's influence ran deep, and every door she knocked on remained closed. The Montague family had never recovered. Their social standing collapsed. They had retired to Palm Beach, exiled from Boston society. Jacob's phone buzzed. "Detective Reyes called," he said. "Danny Marquez is being released next month." Emily looked up sharply. "The man who handled Brandon's gambling debts?" "The same." Jacob leaned back in his chair. Though his organization didn't survive Brandon's testimony, 10 years in prison broke his hold on Boston's gambling operations. "Think he'll cause problems?" Jacob's smile turned cold. "Marquez understands the new order. His replacement knows who really runs the city." The intercom buzzed again. "Mr. Calloway, Mitchell's here with Mrs. Reyes." Mira entered with Jacob's father, their wedding rings catching the light. They had married 5 years ago, their shared understanding of justice and consequences forging a bond that surprised no one who knew them well. "The Milton deal is done?" Mira asked, her detective's instincts still sharp despite her promotion to commissioner of police. "Emily handled it," Jacob confirmed. "The Calloway Group now controls charitable operations for most major hospitals in New England." Mitchell Calloway, still carrying his military bearing at 70, settled into a chair. "Any pushback from the medical establishment?" "None they'd dare express," Emily replied, her smile razor-sharp. Our foundations have the highest efficiency ratings in the country. 95% of donations reach actual patients. Unlike in Brandon Morton's day. Mira nodded. Speaking of which, his parole officer called. He's requested permission to return to Massachusetts. Denied, I assume? Jacob's voice left no room for doubt. Of course. His crimes against children's medical care make him permanently unwelcome in this state. The Callaway Group's influence now extended far beyond business. Jacob had built a network of power that reached into every facet of Boston life. Construction, healthcare, politics, law enforcement, all managed with the same quiet strength that had once been mistaken for weakness. Emily checked her phone. The Robin Foundation board meets in an hour. Another troubled hospital charity looking for salvation. Take Harvey with you, Jacob instructed. He's earned partnership status with his loyalty. Harvey had risen from driver to key executive, his unwavering dedication during the Brandon Morton affair proving his worth. Jacob rewarded loyalty above all else, building his inner circle from those who had stood by him in the darkest times. Did you see last week's society pages? Mira asked, passing over a magazine. Renee made an appearance at a Palm Beach charity event. The photo showed a woman desperately clinging to past glory. Renee's attempts to maintain her socialite status in Florida's wealthy enclaves had met limited success. The scandal of her affair with Brandon and their connection to stolen charity funds had followed her south. She tried contacting Emily again, Jacob mentioned. Myra's expression hardened. Still doesn't understand that actions have consequences. Something she never learned from the Montags, Mitchell added, is military precision unwavering. That family confused social position with actual power. Emily gathered her files, the light catching the Harvard Law ring on her finger. The Montague name means nothing now. Dad made sure of that. The systematic dismantling of the Montague family's influence had been a masterpiece of patient revenge. Poor investments had eroded their fortune, whispered rumors had destroyed their social connections, and Wilson and Alara now lived as virtual recluses in their Palm Beach mansion, their once mighty name reduced to cautionary gossip at country clubs. The new pediatric cancer wing opens next month, Emily noted. The press wants a statement from the family. The new pediatric cancer wing would stand as the crowning achievement of Jacob's Hospital Foundation. Funded entirely by legitimate donations, it would offer cutting-edge treatment to children, regardless of their family's financial means. Your mother's ghost finally exorcised? Mira asked quietly. Jacob's voice held absolute conviction. There was never anything to exorcise. Renee was just a chapter in a much longer story. The real story was always about building something lasting. Mitchell nodded approvingly. The Callaway legacy. Emily's phone buzzed with another message. Brandon is trying to apply for medical consulting work in Connecticut. Handle it, Jacob instructed. Already done, Emily replied, her smile mirroring her father's. His detailed history will reach their licensing board tomorrow. No state in New England will risk its medical reputation by accepting him. Brandon Morton's downfall had not ended with his prison sentence. Every attempt to rebuild his career was met with invisible barriers, his criminal past surfacing at just the right moments to ensure he found no foothold in the medical community. Marquez asked about him during his exit interview, Mira noted. Seemed amused that the once revered surgeon responsible for his downfall is now writing patient education materials for pharmaceutical companies. Karma, Mitchell observed with military precision. Or justice, Jacob countered. He rose from his chair and walked to the window, gazing out over the city. The Callaway Group's newest tower dominated the skyline, a physical testament to the empire he had built from the ashes of betrayal. The board meeting is in 10 minutes, Emily reminded him. They'll want to review the Milton acquisition details. That boardroom would be filled with men and women who owed their positions to Jacob's patronage. Like his father's military unit, he had built an organization founded on absolute loyalty and shared purpose. Harvey says the Providence Hospital Board is vulnerable, Emily continued. Their foundation is showing signs of the same issues Mass General had 10 years ago. Mira raised an eyebrow. History repeating itself? History teaching its lessons, Jacob corrected, turning from the window. Some learn from the mistakes of others. Some have to learn the hard way. The intercom buzzed one final time. Mr. Callaway, a message from Palm Beach. Renee Montague Callaway is trying to reach you. Jacob exchanged a glance with Emily, seeing his own steel reflected in her eyes. No response necessary. Some chapters stayed closed. A decade had transformed the man once seen as the safe choice into one of Boston's most powerful figures. The quiet strength that Renee and Brandon had mistaken for weakness had reshaped the city's medical, business, and social landscapes. The diamond necklace remained in its safe deposit box, locked away alongside evidence of past crimes and betrayals. Jacob never looked at it anymore. Like Renee, Like Brandon, like the Montags, it belonged to a finished chapter. Outside, the Callaway Group's tower caught the sunlight, its windows gleaming not with reflection, but with promise. Inside its offices, deals were made, power was brokered, and consequences were arranged. Emily gestured toward the boardroom. Shall we? Time to add another hospital to the family. Jacob nodded, a quiet pride warming his chest. His daughter, in spirit if not in blood, had learned his most valuable lesson. True power did not come from social position or professional titles. It came from the patient strength to build empires and destroy enemies. The safe choice had proven to be anything but safe for those who had betrayed him. But for those who remained loyal, who understood the value of family and consequences, Jacob Callaway had built something extraordinary from the wreckage of betrayal. In the end, the price of treachery hadn't just been paid. It had been transformed into an empire. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.